Welcome to Beyond the Law.
Beyond Law Group's podcast that brings you unfiltered conversations
with our lawyers, clients and friends.
We'll be having frank discussions about our experiences in the legal sector,
Sharing our thoughts on current topics from a legal and a personal standpoint.
as well as offering our top tips for those pursuing a career in law.
Beyond the Law.
Beyond the law.
Beyond the Law. So, Hanan, welcome to the Beyond the Law podcast.
Thank you for having
really
me.
nice to have you on. So, really interesting business that you built. What I would like to know is where did the idea originally come from?
So Intotum's original idea kind of came when I was about 16 and my granddad was going through cancer. And as a result of the cancer, they had to remove his bladder and give him a stoma bag, which sits directly on his waistband. And because of that, he really struggled to find clothing that would work with the stoma bag. Its position means that any trousers are going to dig in, they might burst the bag. Just think about bending over. All of a sudden, like there's so many new problems with it. And so he really struggled to find anything that would work for it and started to look for solutions and turned to, the NHS and trying to find something. And all he found was tracksuit bottoms. And that is generally the accepted solution, which is not great. Nobody wants to wear tracksuit bottoms. So I started to look for solutions for him and quickly discovered there weren't any. There was nothing nice, nothing that anybody wanted to wear. And so what should have been a smooth-ish recovery for him, he'd had cancer multiple times before. And each time he'd come back, stronger, honestly. But this time he had started to pull away from things. He'd stopped going to see friends. He'd stopped going to the football and all these things he liked to do because he didn't have anything to wear. And so I was seeing the huge impact that the clothing was having. And I was also seeing that there was no options, which led me down this path of, discovering what's called adaptive fashion, which is clothing for people with disabilities. But I also have been making my own clothes since I was 10,
Oh, wow.
11. So I've been making my own clothes because I didn't like the way things felt in the shops. I'm actually neurodivergent myself, but I only got diagnosed when I was about 19.
Oh, really? Wow.
And so I didn't know that was the reason. I just thought I was a little bit peculiar or something. And so, I always hated the way things felt and started to make my own clothes. So I immediately was like, okay, I think I can maybe fix this.
Okay, well, that's brilliant. And so I guess it's a bit of a personal interest that you started the business. Is that enough to keep going? Is this something that you've always thought you wanted to do in terms of business, or?
I always wanted to be a fashion designer,
Right.
but I didn't imagine that it would lead me to this route or lead me down the path of disability inclusive clothing at all. When I was making these clothes, I was just making them because I enjoyed it. I thought maybe, I'll be a wedding dress designer or something like that. But it was when I was actually in university and I was doing all these different projects they set us. And I would always try and bring adaptive into every project, but I was realising that nobody really cared about adaptive clothing, that there wasn't roles in it, there wasn't a job I could go get in it. And if not, I was going to have to just leave that all behind and leave what I was passionate about to go get a normal job in the industry and go be a standard women's wear designer. And so it was really the fact of being told no so many times and seeing how annoyed that made me, but also the people I was working with, the fact, especially in the disabled community, I'm just so used to pushback and barriers that I knew I could actually take down one of those barriers. And so that was really the turning point and the motivation to actually say, okay, this is a business, and that's genuinely what motivates me daily to keep doing it.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. It sounds like resilience runs in the family.
Yeah, you have to be resilient in business.
So getting started, how difficult was that? Obviously, you've talked about the idea and the concept and not going down the traditional route. But when you first started talking to people about adaptive clothing, did people know what you meant, or was there just sort of blank looks at the other end of the table? How did that start?
I think it's like with anything, when you're starting out, you're trying to find the best way to explain it. And, when I was, 20, trying to pitch this business, I didn't know what my elevator pitch was. I didn't have my one-liner. So not having that, and then also having to explain fashion and clothing and disability on top of that just meant I was getting a lot of blank looks, and a lot of people just not really seeing the commercial potential either. There'd be a lot of people that would say, oh, that sounds lovely, but they didn't actually understand that this is a business, not just me with a sewing machine. And so I really had to step into my own and figure out the best way to portray what this is, and also explain to people how many people are out there struggling with this. I think so many people think disability is niche and therefore think the need for adaptive is niche, but 1 in 4 people in the UK has a disability, and globally 1.3 billion people have a disability. So, you know, there's a lot of people that are affected by clothing, and we can easily go past that to people that aren't disabled but still need clothing that's easier to put on.
For sure.
So definitely difficult at first, but when you start to bring facts and figures into it and people realise, they quickly go, oh, okay, like this is a real thing.
There's commercial sense behind this as well.
Yeah.
Okay. And in terms of the change in the landscape then over the last few years, because I've noticed adaptive fashion seems to be a far more widely used term. Major retailers getting into it as well. How do you feel about that? Is that something that is concerning from a competition perspective, or do you look at it through the other lens and think, do you know what, this is actually brilliant because this is what I wanted?
I actually think it's really positive because, as I said, a lot of people had never heard of the word adaptive. So as soon as, you know, some of the major retailers start to get into it, it means more people have heard the word adaptive. They understand what it is and they know what to look for as well. And so if someone knows to search adaptive, they're going to find Intotum, which is great. But also it means that we have an opportunity to work with more people. There's definitely opportunities to work with more retailers because if, you know, some of them see the commercial success of others, they want to tap into that, which ultimately means better access for the disabled community. One thing I always say is that nobody shops from the same place. Unless you're me and you're always wearing Intotum, then otherwise you're often wearing your outfit with a mix of different retailers. And so I don't expect you only to shop from me. And so, of course, if there's more adaptive options, it helps. It means that you can buy my top and their trousers and wear it together.
Brilliant.
That works for me.
That's really good. So you've mentioned the name there, Intotum. Where does that come from and why did you pick it?
So Intotum is Latin for all together or as one, or unbroken, which I love that one because that one is something I actually found out later down the line because I knew it meant all together, but it wasn't until I was kind of trying to articulate this for the website at some point that I was like, oh, okay, it also means unbroken, which I think is really lovely, specifically for the disabled community and the level of resilience that there is within the community. But I really like the fact that I've been able to find a word that encompasses what we're about and the fact it's all together because everything is co-designed. That's so important when you're talking about adaptive clothing, and anything to do with the disabled community is so much access is made as an afterthought and actually without consulting the disabled people. And so what we do is every single design is based on what someone asks us. So one of our strap lines is we don't make it unless you ask for it.
Brilliant.
Because I'm never going to tell you what trousers to wear or what top to wear. You come to me, say, I would love an adaptive skirt, and I'll get to work. But that's how it works. And so that means that they test it, they wear it repeatedly, they pick the colours, all of that, and the name encompasses it. Oh.
Fantastic. So it sounds as though you had a vision. You've done that vision. Well, to a point. How close is where Intotum is now to what you envisaged it would be when you first started?
I mean, one thing I like to think is I have a long way to go, but I've also achieved a lot more than I thought I would. So I like to look back and, you know, even when I was driving here, I was thinking, oh, I used to do this route all the time, but I'd be like going to college and no way at that point did I think I'd be doing what I'm doing now. And so we are definitely hitting a lot of milestones. We've had some really huge achievements of, you know, some major awards. We've had huge traction in the last, you know, year, 6 months even. It's a huge shift. We shipped to 20 plus countries last year. And to have achieved things I truly didn't think we would. Well, by this point. I knew we would, but by this point. And so there's definitely a long way to go. I really would like to see us kind of take a hold of that global market more. And especially we see such traction across in the US and Australia. I'd love if we're able to actually have a foothold in there, and expand into retail is a big one I'd love to do, because I love when my customers can come and feel the clothing and try it on. It's a whole different experience to shopping online. And I know people talk about the high street dying, but it's a lie, actually. consumers love being able to try on the clothing. It's a whole different experience, and that's something I want to bring accessibly.
Okay, brilliant. And you mentioned the international angle there. So what is that just because of sheer volume, or is it kind of some countries further behind in terms of their thinking around adaptive fashion, and actually you're kind of at the forefront of bringing that to certain territories? Is that?
We're definitely at the forefront. One of the things we like to say is there's adaptive clothing and then there's adaptive fashion, and we do the fashion. Any kind of limited options out there are usually really medical, and you will see across the globe options, but they're really focused on treatment. You might find options that are great for cancer or great for dialysis, but not for the fact that, you know, disabled people are at work every day or going out for drinks with their friends.
Yep.
And so I'm trying to create clothing for that. I'm trying to create fashionable pieces that you love and treasure and can wear with anything. So we are definitely ahead of the curve in terms of that mentality, but also there's a lack of demand, and that's why we see there's a lack of options out there, which is why we see the demand internationally, and that's why we see those orders come in, because they're willing to pay to ship it all the way from us, because there is no better options there.
Yeah, for sure. And internationally as well, I mean, I guess that feeds into supply chains and all these things that you probably learnt about, and then you're having to put into practice a lot sooner than you thought you might have done.
Yeah.
How's that sort of route been as well? Because that starting out with a vague, with a great idea, but with a vague idea of how other things work around it. And we had a little chat just beforehand, just around some of the things that you're looking to do at the moment, and that being slightly different to what you started out doing.
Yeah.
How does that feel when you're kind of building a business? Because that must be quite a scary place for a founder who has a brilliant idea and has executed it as well as you have, but you know. This is the first time doing some of these things.
Yeah, it's new territory for me. It's definitely always a case of learning on the job. Like, I truly did not know that it would be this complicated about a lot of things. I was trained as a designer. I don't have a background in business. I didn't work in business. And so I often, like to kind of remind myself that I didn't have that corporate experience, so I'm doing pretty well. But especially when things are always changing, new EU laws or new tariffs, it's really difficult to navigate. But one thing that reassures me is I look to a lot of what other founders are doing, especially founders 5 years ahead of me, and they're all over Instagram complaining about the tariffs and all these new law changes and confused by them.
Yeah.
So I think, okay, well, if you with your huge team also are confused,
Yeah.
no wonder I am.
Yeah.
But I also love to learn. Like, I've always loved that. It doesn't matter if it's a topic I have really no interest in. I want to know everything about it.
Yeah.
And so that is one of the beauties of business, is I'm able to learn on the job all the time.
Yeah.
And figure out how to navigate it quickly. That's one of the things I've always prided myself in, is learning fast.
Brilliant. So in terms of budding fashion designers that are coming through the ranks now, what sort of 3 things do you think you would kind of say that they have to think about before they get going? Or what would you prioritize if you were to do it again?
I would say to definitely look beyond just the designs. I think as a designer, I had no idea about the cost of things or manufacturing or any of that. And so I think it's really important to find any experience you can, whether that's interning or going to work for another business, and learning what it's actually like behind the scenes when it comes to wanting to make something and turn a drawing into a design. But then past that, learn what it's like in the global marketplace. Something that is a bestseller in the UK probably isn't going to be a bestseller over in the UAE.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to look at how the fashion landscape is beyond the UK, because we're really taught just in the country that we're based in. But then I would also say to learn something about finances and maths.
Okay.
That is a huge thing I see a lot of. I'm okay with maths, and I was never awful with it, and I'm actually pretty good with a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
But the amount of creatives I meet that have no understanding of cash flow or money management, even if it's just you learn how to budget your own finances, you're going to be way ahead of the curve when it comes to wanting to start your own business.
Yeah, and that's something that I've seen as a lawyer to creative industries for the last 15, 20 years. There are loads of creatives that I meet that have got wonderful ideas, but they don't know how to protect them, or they don't think about what could potentially go wrong, or how they're going to build value in the brand, which is something. And one of the reasons why we wanted to get you on the podcast is because I think from a really early stage, you recognise the value in getting good professional advice really, really early on. And it's quite impressive, really, that there's someone like you who's got fantastic business and a great idea, and also is astute enough to consider those other areas as well. Is there anything in particular that sort of made you go through that thought process, or did you always have a vague idea of what you would like to build this brand into, so therefore you knew you were going to have to prepare the groundwork?
I think the thing is that as designers, we're so used to ideas being copied.
Yeah.
The whole industry runs on copying. I mean, what you see on the runway is quickly on the high street.
Yep.
And with the invent of these huge brands like Zara and H&M, you truly can get a dupe of anything. And so when you're creating something that takes so much time and care, you really just don't want to see someone else just take it off you. And so I was really keen to understand if there was any way I could protect my designs. And when I was in that final year of study and I was creating all these things and looking to post them online and start talking about what I was making, I realized there was probably a lot of risk associated in doing that, because I started to hear stories of other graduates that had sent their portfolio off to somebody, didn't get the job, but then saw their designs on the runway. And so that's honestly like my nightmare. And I was having nightmares about it. And that's why I sought out advice and was recommended to speak to you guys. Because ultimately, all I want to do is protect my ideas, protect things I've invented, you know? When it's something that you've put all of that time and money into, you want to make sure it's yours, and make sure that I can continue to use it and someone else isn't going to claim they came up with it first as well. So yeah, that was definitely important to me, and something that most designers don't know that they can do, because we're taught so much that it will get stolen. Yeah. And that, you know, it's a compliment, which it's not. It's not a compliment. Like, I invented it. So yeah, it was really important to me to find out. And when I discovered that I could get the design rights and that I needed to get the trademarks and things, it really made me felt that I was prepared to step into business and prepared to launch. But also, it gave me a lot more credibility, because when you're 20, walking into rooms with investors trying to tell them about ideas, especially as a female founder, you get a totally different reception to somebody double my age, because I don't have that experience that they're looking for. And so when I'm able to say things like, it's IP backed, immediately the conversation turns, because they understand that I know what I'm talking about and that I'm a serious business person.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. I think the instance that you talk about designers not really knowing about what to do with designs, or not really considering protecting them is rife. And I've heard loads of horror stories about things being stolen. If I guess on that point, if startup businesses in the UK could get more support, or a better route to market that sort of show them these things, how do you think the professional community can help support that? I know you've got some great contacts in the industry, and you've done really well, as you touched on with the award-winning process as well. So a bit of insight into that would be really helpful. But in terms of what the professional community can do for businesses like yours, really early stage, what does that look like?
I think it's making resources easily available and easy to read is a big one. So much of the stuff I read to do with business is still written in really old-fashioned jargon and acronyms and words that, as a startup and as a young founder especially, I have literally no idea what they meant. Yeah. And so the extra barriers of having to Google every third word means there's no way I'm going to understand what those sentence is about. Yeah. And so I think by making resources clear and understandable and signposting where you can go, you know, just the fact that I was able to connect in with a mentor that was like, yeah, there is a way to protect this. Yeah, of course. Like, it was an obvious, like, I'll connect you with these guys. And so then you guys made the process so much easier and explained it to me. But if there was a way that that could be made simpler, I think that would make a huge difference to so many designers to know where to turn to. Because when you say things like lawyers, people just assume like, well, that's definitely not for this stage of business. Yeah. They assume you only think you have to go to lawyers when things go wrong.
When it goes wrong. Yeah, exactly.
Not to help them stay right. So that was really interesting to understand and to know that I could protect myself and turn to lawyers and have lawyers before I thought I needed them. And then when it comes to the award side of things, it definitely helped having that, as I say. And one of the core things I get asked all the time when I'm pitching for a competition or an award is, yeah, but how are you going to protect this? because everyone has seen so many ideas be ripped off. I mean, anyone that's watched Dragon's Den has seen that every single time they ask, well, what if such and such comes along and steals it? And so knowing that I can say, well, actually, I have lawyers and they have protected it, and I have this and I have that, it means that they go, okay, you're fine then.
Yeah.
That's the risk gone.
Yeah.
And so ultimately, anyone that wants to invest or support is always going to be risk averse, and it removes that whole barrier.
Yeah. What has been your darkest hour then in terms of the founding and process?
I think it's always trying to find the money is a big one. When I started out, I didn't have any money behind the idea.
Yeah.
I was, as I say, in my final year of study. I was working part-time jobs to fund being a student, never mind then coming up with a business. And as much as my family are incredibly supportive, they couldn't support me with a check, you know?
Yeah.
So I knew I had this idea. I knew I needed to get funding, and I had no idea where to turn to.
Yeah.
Looking at things like loans, it's just impossible. Especially as a young female founder, they're not going to back you. We're seeing a lot more come up, especially since I found it. I think it's actually a lot easier to found something now compared to even 3 years ago. But the fact is, I didn't know what to do. And so I looked at what the founders had done and saw there was these grants and competitions available, especially as a graduate. There were a lot available. So I got into pitching.
Yeah.
I've always loved to talk, but I wasn't necessarily confident in pitching.
Yeah.
I was actually super nervous about
Really?
talking about my ideas. I think also because of this idea, this is something that I say to students and founders that I meet all the time, because I like to teach and mentor, is to share their idea, because so many of them are so scared that if they tell someone, they're going to steal it.
Right.
And I think I also had that problem of, what if I pitch it to someone and they just steal it off me and do it better? But the fact of the matter is, everyone's got their own lives and they're too busy.
Yeah.
And even if they did steal your idea, they're going to do it in a totally different way to you. So I had to become really confident in telling literally anyone that would listen, or who didn't even want to listen, about my business, to help open doors and get access to funding.
Yeah.
But definitely the darkest moment was kind of after I'd done my first collection launch, and it had gone well, but I'd spent so much money on it and spent money on protecting the idea and getting an office and actually just trying to keep the business running for how long it takes to develop a product, that I was totally out of money. But I now suddenly had all this great feedback. I had almost a customer base waiting for what was next, but I had no way to fund it. That was definitely just the nightmare of the start of 2025.
Yeah.
Was, you know, I have literally no money. I have all these great design ideas. People want bigger sizes. I know exactly what they're after now. I've got all of these great, you know, backers and influencers and all these people that want to support me, but I've got nothing to give them. So I just was like, okay, the money's going to find me. So I started to do the design development. I found excellent manufacturers. I totally redeveloped our offering, and I had enough money just about scraped together to sample the pieces. But that was that. And so I was hitting a roadblock. So I decided to go back to what I do best, of pitching.
Brilliant.
And that's when I discovered the NatWest competition, which was huge. That was the biggest one I've ever won. I really didn't think I was going to get anywhere near to winning that, but that gave me £70,000.
Amazing.
So that was huge.
Yeah, that is huge.
And that is how I got over it. But it was definitely, you know, it sounds like it was smooth, but it was a good solid 6 months there of absolutely no money and no idea what to do.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Because I think the founder process kind of becomes a bit glamorized these days. I think people presume because you're going off to fashion events that you're living this absolute high life. Yeah. They probably don't see the grit and determination and all the effort that goes in behind it. They see you turn up at a pitch and smiling and winning, obviously. But yeah, I think it's really key for people to understand that actually it's a lot of graft to even get something off the ground, let alone get to where you've got to.
It requires a lot of self-belief. And I think also, you know, I am part of the problem because I like to show the shiny side of things.
Yeah.
I don't want to be crying on the internet. Nobody really does, do they? And so when things get bad, we don't often talk about it. That is when we tend to kind of hide away. But I like to hide away and work at it. I never like to stew in it, which I think is how I've managed to keep it going.
Yeah, brilliant. So you've talked a little bit about the design process and it being really human-led or customer-led as well. how are you finding new technologies, and are you using any new technologies in what you're in the design process or any of the process of the business at the minute? How are you finding that?
There's a lot that needs to catch up when it comes to the new technologies. I actually have written about this quite a lot. It's like one of my specialist subjects, let's say, is co-design process and how we can integrate technologies like AI and really kind of advance the human-centered design process. But the fact of the matter is a lot of the tech is built without disabled people. So just as I'm trying to do with our designs, you need to ask people.
Yeah.
You need to get their perception on it. And because a lot of the disabled community is excluded from, even just schools, it means they don't get into the rooms where this AI is being developed. And so when we looked at streamlining our process by creating digital versions of our patterns and also creating body scans was a big one I looked at. They actually can't be done when it comes to somebody that uses a mobility aid or a wheelchair, because it will scan the walking stick as part of the body.
Right.
So if you can't stand basically for 3 minutes, which is what it requires, you can't be scanned. And so if you try and scan the chair and then the person, that also doesn't work.
Oh, wow. Right. Okay.
So all of a sudden, this amazing new technology that was supposed to streamline the entirety of design has basically been shut off to us.
Yeah.
And so I didn't see the point in investing in it for part of the design, for some of them that could work versus some of them that didn't, when I may as well just stick with what works already, which is good old-fashioned pattern drafting. And so we have to kind of redevelop, and there's a lot of actually really interesting data coming out that shows that, the sizes, especially when it comes to women's wear that we're using, are so old, they're so outdated. I was taught to use patterns and measurements that were set in the 1960s. Women are about 4 sizes bigger than they were in the 1960s on average.
Wow.
And so what we call a standard 12 in the design industry is closer to like a 6, actually, of what women wear now.
Wow.
And so it means that, when you're trying to combine really old-fashioned techniques with totally new technology, there's going to be a clash.
Yeah.
And so I'd like to see that work better.
Okay.
But I definitely think there's ways we can use AI when it comes to accessibility in the workplace.
Sure.
For things like note-taking or collating all of our data, because that is one thing. I'm still not on board when it comes to AI marketing. I think that's super important to us that it's human-focused, because we open-cast all of our opportunities, our shows, our photo shoots. So I don't use AI. We don't retouch anything on that sense. But when it comes to being able to help me as a neurodivergent business owner collate all of my thoughts, big fan.
Hanan, thank you so much for coming in to the Beyond the Law podcast today.
Thank you for having me. I've loved it.
You're really welcome. Hopefully you can come on again in a few years' time.
Yes. See where I am.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Beyond the Law.
To keep up to date with all things Beyond, follow us on our socials at Beyond Law Group.
You can tune into our next episode wherever you find your podcasts.